Hello, friends, and welcome to A Little Room for Healing, where we talk a little about healing, and then we do a little healing, and then we talk a little bit more. I am your host, Joel, and today, again, back from wherever he's been, I have John Tittmann with me. He's for a return appearance. What's wild is, at this moment of the recording, I was actually going to sit with a different person, and that person was unable to make it, and it just so happened that John he came up to visit, and we decided to just sit down and do one. So we're gonna go with the flow on that. Thank you for doing this with me.
I'm happy to be here for an impromptu episode.
So we are really just going to see what comes up and out of us today. And I think that we'll do our usual start with check-ins and flow from there.
Sounds good.
I'm going to go first. Let me get myself situated. Ooh, I'm all over the place today. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm feeling tired and drowsy. And I'm cranky. And there's a little annoyance in me. So that is all present. I'm hot, and I realize that I have a sweatshirt and a stocking hat on, which I will probably take off soon. And also, something that I want to mention in the check-in is that John and I told John beforehand that I don't feel like doing an energy healing session today as far as me giving it. And he said, well, how about I give you Reiki today? And I thought that was a wonderful idea, so we are going to do that. So he'll be giving me energy healing today. I also was like, but I don't want the podcast to be about me and what I'm going through, so necessarily I want it to be a conversation. So that is also, it's going to be more of a conversation about whatever comes up between us, and then he's going to do some healing on me, and then we're going to come back and talk. So that was my check-in / setup for the show. And I will pass it over to John now.
I'm feeling excited to be doing this. I like the fact that none of this was planned, and that also that it's breaking the normal format of that. So all of those things are contributing to me feeling a sense of anticipation of how this is going to go. And my nervous system is interpreting that as excitement right now. So that feels good. And I also just had a nice call with somebody that was interested in exploring all of these kinds of things that we're going to be talking about today. And that was a really nice conversation. So I'm still sitting in the kind of afterglow of that. And I'm also feeling an excited anticipation for an upcoming trip to Mexico, where I'm going for a vision quest. And I'm sure that'll probably be, we could talk about that in the conversation today, but that has been, as I get closer to it, that's been occupying more and more of the background of my psyche. So I guess it's a lot of different things that are all contributing to the same feeling of excitement and anticipation.
Excellent. So that's something I want to add to my check-in is, what was it? I just had it talking about, what was it? Man, I am gone today. This is rough.
Vision quest, excitement, anything like that?
It was, I don't know, maybe it'll come to me in a minute.
Okay.
Because my brain is in a state of freeze at the moment, is there anything that is coming up off the tip of the tongue of yours?
Well, what I was thinking about too is on my check-in how the moment that I mentioned my trip is that there was a period maybe like 2 to 3 weeks ago when I would think about it, that there was this like fear that would come up for me. And that's pretty common for me in when I know that I'm about to embark on something that is pushing the edge of my comfort zone. And a lot of the folks who go to this say that it's kind of similar to the ceremony begins when you set the intention to go to the ceremony as opposed to when you actually drink the medicine. The experiencing of the emotions that come up and the anticipation of it is part of the experience. And for me, I've always conceptualized that like fear and excitement are basically the same somatic sensation. If you take away the mental commentary around it, you're just experiencing this feeling. And if, from the way I would say it is like, if you're feeling that feeling and you anticipate something good is going to happen, you call it excitement. And if you're feeling that same feeling but you anticipate something bad is going to happen, then you feel fear. So it's just interesting to note right now that like when I think about that experience coming up, it's actually mostly excitement. But I did go through periods where I was feeling the same thing and calling it fear. And I think probably even in small ways, I'm not really feeling this now, but you know, being on camera or let's say if I'm doing a performance or something like that, it's a similar feeling where it's like, is it anticipation? Is it excitement? Is it fear? Is it nervousness? And they're kind of all the same thing. And it's just how it like, you know, lands with you that day.
I can feel a semblance of what my body would go through before before a performance of a play that I had done in the past. And it is this barometer that's like, is that the word? Is that the word? Whatever this was, can you give me a better word for this? I'm off today, so
barometer's good. The barometer of an experience.
How it moves so quickly, and then like at one moment I'm like, oh, I'm pumped, and then like literally in the next moment I'm like, oh shit, what if something goes wrong, and like fear, and then oh my god, I'm excited, oh I can't wait to do this, and then
Yep.
Stage fright.
Yeah.
Stage excite fright.
Yeah, it's like learning how to surf the changes that can be really quick.
Oh, I literally thought you were saying it's like learning how to surf.
Oh, but
then you said the changes. And I was like, oh, how is it? You know how to surf, John?
That's interesting. I mean, I've thought of that metaphor a lot, like surfing the waves of your emotions. Was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And how, you know, depending on the weather, some days it's like really choppy, and other times it is actually like pretty calm.
Yeah, I remembered what I was going to say before.
Good.
And is it okay if I say it now?
Yeah.
It's different than what we're talking about. The thing that came up while you were doing your check-in was I'm feeling in my body a difference in how the container of the podcast is feeling, because it hasn't been set necessarily that I'm holding. Usually I'm like, I'm here for you, and we're going to talk about whatever comes up with you, and then I'm going to give you energy healing, and then come back and talk more. So there's like a set container that I drop into and feel pretty warm in, and that does not feel like it's here right now. And I don't know what the container is, and I don't know who's here for who, or maybe we're here for each other, which we probably are. But there's a difference in the container, and that's also making me feel a little loose in the head, in the mind. So,
well, it is also like sometimes it's the reverse. There's the container, which is like the turn the tables, where, but it's very clear that they're now there for you, and you're going to do your work, right? But this is sort of neither of those, so it's kind of like falling in between.
Yeah.
But it feels like it could be a little bit of both, because maybe you'll interview me a little bit, but then I'm giving you a healing session, and then. But we'll flow with it.
Yeah. It's so interesting stuff, which makes me afraid and excited.
And that might change in 30 seconds from now.
Exactly. Tell us a little bit about what this excursion that you're going on is. This.
Yeah, I'm going to Mexico for a Vision Quest and a Sundance, which are both traditions from the Lakota people. I got connected to this group through an online community and a men's group that I've been going to. And couple of the guys there have done this before, either the Vision Quest or the Sundance, with this man from Mexico, and they invited him on for a Zoom call to just tell the community a little bit about him and these experiences. And I had heard a little bit about them from the friends of mine, but then when he came on this Zoom call, it was one of those things where when he started speaking, there was just this like resonance in me right away where I'm like, I'm going to this. And this was probably maybe like over the summer last year. So since then, I knew I was going to do it. And then within the last, let's say, month or two, we've been actively involved in the preparation of it more. There's they created a WhatsApp group. They showed us like a little bit about what to do to prepare for it. But and they're also, it's a little bit, part of the experience is actually them not telling you too much up front. So I do know the basics about what I'm going to be experiencing, and what I can share about that is that the Vision Quest is an experience where each of the I will be in a small little I guess like rectangle. I don't know exactly how big it is, but I'll be by myself in nature for 4 days and 4 nights, and I will not be eating or drinking anything for that period of time. And the purpose of that experience is to get really deeply in touch with yourself, to get in touch with a vision for your life, or this period of your life. And for me, I mean, the way I would say the reason I'm going is I feel a calling to do it, but just to see what emerges in a space like that. I've been involved in ceremonial plant medicine experiences for a number of years and have derived a huge amount of benefit from that. But there are many ways of getting to that deeper place inside of us. And even before medicine, I had been meditating for a long time, and that's another one. But also, when you look traditionally, what are some other ways that do that? Fasting, sleep deprivation, and solitude have been 3 things that are also triggers. They call them flow state triggers, or something to get to like a deeper part of your psyche. And there is a part of me that has a desire to experience all the different ways of getting there. And so, and on top of that, just the connection.
So you're doing them all at the same time.
There's no medicine involved.
Okay, yeah. 3 out of the 4.
Essentially, yeah. So that's I'm excited about that. And then the Sundance is a follow-up experience. So basically, in this tradition, once you have experienced the Vision Quest, that's sort of like a prerequisite. That is open to men and women. And then once you complete that successfully, you have the option of, if you're a man, participating in the Sundance, and if you're a woman, participating in the Moon Dance. And then that experience is more of a group one. You are in a group of men or women. It's also 4 days and four nights of no drinking, eating, or sleeping. But this now is more about it's more externally oriented. So whereas the Vision Quest was, it's also reflected, I should mention, like this preparation for where you make certain prayers. Like you tie these little cloths together filled with tobacco, and each one of them represents a prayer. And when you do the Vision Quest, the prayers are all supposed to be for yourself and for your own life. And then when you do the prayers for the Sundance, they're actually supposed to be for others and for the world. And so that's reflected in the nature of the experience itself too, where you're actually going to be either by yourself or with other people. And so that's a little bit about it.
Well, it sounds intense. Sounds intense. And I look forward to hearing about it when you come back.
Yeah, I definitely can sense from the way that I'm preparing for it. The last time that I faced like that, like navigating through the fear and the anticipation of it, was my first trip that I ever took to the jungle. And that was a number of years ago. So I'm reminded of the preparation for that experience and how there's a part of me that's like, okay, it's difficult to be with the fear, but that's understandably part of the experience. But the flip side is when I have that response to something that's coming up, I know it's going to be really big and really transformative. So that's when I think of that, it goes more towards the anticipation, the excitement end of it.
I'm having this idea of maybe we could share some of our experiences with plant medicine.
Sure.
If that feels like it's up your alley for the day.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm also want to state that while you were talking about that, and I don't think it had anything to do with what you're talking about, but some sadness was coming through me. So I'm interested in, I don't know if I want to dig into it, but I'm interested in, I just like to state that there's sadness in me.
Okay.
So that is present. And I'm not sure what it's about, which is also fine. Yeah. Plant medicine. And maybe, I don't know. Something also, this is so weird. I'm having such a weird time right now. This is really, really wild. Because, like, I also feel like me suggesting that deadened some energy. Did you feel the energy die a little bit when I was like, let's tell stories about plant medicine?
Let's do this. Maybe a little bit. Yeah. I could see what you meant.
Like, it was like, it was like I was trying to make something happen.
Okay. Yes.
And that then like suddenly I felt like a deadness happening.
Like yeah. Field. Okay. So there's a part of you that's still sitting with the discomfort of not having a container here. And
Yes.
It's like I need to create a container and I have an idea, so let me just run with this. And maybe it didn't quite mesh with what was happening before it.
Yeah. That's what's happening.
Okay.
That's what's happening. Which is, I want to state, has nothing to do with the sadness that's in me. I'm not sad about there not being a container. I just want to state that. But yeah, there is that feeling. I guess that's what was going on. Yeah. I mean, I also like, wow, what is going on with me? You have any questions? Like, can we?
Yes.
Can we move this?
Yeah. This is good. I like this. Well, I'm curious about the sadness, in the sense that it came up while I was sharing what I was sharing, and maybe it has something to do with what I was sharing. Maybe it doesn't. But maybe just to look for a second, like, was there something about the things that I was sharing about the experience coming up? Feeling sadness in me? Was it no? Okay.
No, it wasn't about what you were doing, because we've had this conversation. You've told me about this what you're doing before, and
Gotcha.
I don't feel any sadness around. There was definitely, I didn't feel any sadness at you, and it wasn't anything about what you were talking about that was triggering sadness. I think it has to do partly with what I've been in an expansive state for the last couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And yesterday, for the first time since the expansive state started, I felt grindiness again. And it's difficult for me sometimes to go back into the reality of grindiness that will eventually and always happen in your life, from a state of expansiveness, which this one lasted for a pretty long time for me, and it was a really big expansion. So maybe hearing you go to do this was triggering something about me feeling the close offness of my expansiveness at this moment. Possibly.
That's a tough one for me too. I can relate to that a lot, actually, of the difficulty of coming back to contraction after you've experienced expansion. And I hear people say that it's possible to be in a state that is unattached to whether one is expanding or contracting, knowing that it will forever move back and forth between those two poles. And there's another part of me that's like, does it always, like, because then I hear things about like there is a state available where suffering ends, like the end of suffering is what the path of Buddhism at least promises, and that but then it doesn't mean endless expansion.
I don't think I'm close to that yet.
Yeah, well, me neither. Me neither. But my mind thinks of that and be like, well, that's cool. Like, and sometimes I think in the really expanded places, I've like convinced myself that I've arrived at that place. Not enlightenment, but just like, you know, of this like, oh, this is how it's going to be all the time, and then it doesn't, and then it comes back, and then there is sadness associated with that. I'm saying all that to be like, I relate to that, and it's difficult to.
I had this conversation last night with our mutual friend Lily, and was talking about it because it started yesterday, and I was like, even in talking to her about the contractedness, I was like, but I still feel. She goes, well, even when you go back to contractedness, like you've moved the dial up, so you have that expansiveness has moved you forward, so your contractedness is getting less contracted than it was, and which I totally agree with. And then that made me realize, oh yeah, the expansiveness is still underneath the contracted. That is still in there. It's actually still part. It's actually part of this contractedness. So, at the time, that made me feel better.
Yeah, it made me think of someone who was kind of like a teacher of mine who talked about an experience he had with his teacher, which is that he would come in for these like I guess sessions with his teacher would basically be like, you know, how has your practice been? How's it going today? And sometimes he would come in and be like, it's great, like, you know, I'm really getting it, like I'm finally like getting in the flow of this, and then his teacher would just sort of be like, don't worry, it'll change. And then
I think I've heard you say this to me before.
Yeah, and then he would come in other times and be like, like I'm totally lost. I have no idea what's going on. You know, go on, and then his teacher would be like, don't worry, it'll change.
Yeah. It's kind of like the journey of anything, really. The journey of healing, the journey of going through a year, the journey of a day is such that we'll never be feeling the same thing the whole time. Like even throughout this podcast, I won't be feeling this exact way I'm feeling right now. By the end, I won't be feeling this way. Or even in the next 5 minutes, I probably be feeling different. Even if it's subtle and slight, it's different. So which means that the journey is ever changing, and we are fluid beings, and our emotions and feelings are fluid. So that's why just being present with what's coming up is such a great way to traverse the world.
Yeah,
instead of judging it and trying to fight it, just be with it, because it's going to change. It literally is. When you're with it, it's moving faster than if you're pushing it down.
Yes, that's definitely true. And what that brought up for me when you were saying that is this idea that when you look really deeply at the present moment, it's always, how do I say this? There's sort of like always two ways to look at it. It's like every moment is constantly dying. And so there's this sadness that can accompany the fact that, like, if you're holding on to the current thing, it's like what you just said is like, it's going to be gone, can either be like, oh man, like nothing lasts, you know? Or looked at it through another way, it's like, something new is always being born.
I was going to say that. When you said every moment's dying, I was like, well, every moment's being born too, John.
So that's where it comes back to attachment, is like, if you like the current thing and you don't want it to leave, then you feel sad when it goes away. Versus if you don't like the current thing, you're just like, oh, of course it's going to go away. That's great. Like,
that is so in line with why the expansive state feels so good, and I'm so happy to leave the contracted state, and the contracted state does not feel as good, so I'm so sad to leave the expansive state. Yeah. Man, more attachment work to do.
Well, that's and then that brings me back to like identity. The sense of identity is like, is the thing that you're identifying with the leaving or the the coming, you know, and and how I guess true non-attachment would be realizing that both are always happening and you're not identifying with one or the other.
You're just in it.
And then maybe that's the freedom from suffering.
Yeah.
But
I actually now just being makes more sense to me. When you think of like being attached to the leaving or attached to the new, the coming, and you get rid of those, then you're not attached to either leaving or coming. You're just being.
Mm-hmm. And the same duality of pleasure and pain. Ultimately, everything you're experiencing is just sensations, and you're labeling as one or the other.
Sensations. Here we go again. I'm telling you, my one of my main intentions for the year is to expand my body's capacity to experience sensuality. So senses, sensation, and I'm seeing it everywhere. It's like when you're like, oh, there's a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere. Now I'm like, senses, experiencing my senses in as much of capacity as I can, an extended capacity that I can. And now I'm hearing sensuality and sensations and senses everywhere, and it's coming up in all these conversations for me.
Sensation is your red car.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So what have you learned about sensation, or what has been your experience of how that has changed this year? I know we're not too far into the year, but is there anything that's new and novel about that for you?
New and novel is that I'm inviting more of an experience of it into my life, namely through touch and through I started doing this chakra coloring book just to spend time with colors. So I've invited it that way, and I actually got a gym membership, and that's something that is very new to me. And I noticed at the gym when I'm doing my workout that I'm really noticing the sensations of what my body's doing as I'm doing the workout, and I'm not just like trying to pile through something. I'm actually like being with it in the moment throughout the process of lifting the weight or doing the stretch, and really noticing exactly what's happening in my body. So I'm just being more present and more aware to the sensations, which is the new thing. And it's still I feel like it's still too early in the experiment, quote unquote, to have any findings yet.
Okay. When you mentioned the gym thing, that brought up something for me, which is a little bit different, but you open to
Tell me.
switching around. I've been wondering about this because I've had an interesting experience to my physical body. I realized that for a lot of my life, I lived not really in touch with my body. And then as I started to feel what was in my body, there was a lot of pain. And I know both of my parents lived with a lot of chronic pain in their lives. So part of my healing journey has been very physical. It's manifested in a lot of physical ways. So I run into this thing when it comes to physical body related stuff. Let's say like the gym as an example of when I do a really good workout, I find that the process of working out is really good for my body. However, I go through this period of sometimes a lot of resistance to doing it, or even when I actually finish the workout for a day or two after, I know everybody's usually sore, but sometimes I'm like really, my body feels very uncomfortable for that period of time. And then when that passes, it's like, oh, that was totally worth it, because like whatever came out felt really good. So I go back and forth with this idea of, because you hear a lot of times this advice of like, you need to like trust your body and like listen to what your body wants. And sometimes if I take that literally, it's like, well, don't go to the gym because it's going to hurt. Why would you like do this thing that's going to cause you this pain? But then sometimes it's like you need to listen to your body, but then also push through it, because on the other side of that is something better. So I guess this general question, if you have any thoughts on this, is like, how do you know the discernment of like, when is it appropriate to listen to your body and interpret that as like, I need to not do this versus I need to push through this because on the other side of it is actually like something better.
Well, an interesting thing about I signed up for a workout. I bought a workout regimen that was pseudo tailored to my age, weight, and desire for what I want for my body. And this program tells me you don't actually have to lift weights and push yourself to the extreme so that it hurts. You can actually do it really comfortably so you barely feel any ache and pain at all, and it's still doing what you want it to do. So that's something I learned about that. And as far as pushing through things, because you know it's going to feel good on the other side, is a way of life. It's the way that I've lived most of my healing life. It's like I'm going to do the thing that really makes me uncomfortable because I know I'm going to feel better on the other side. I don't know if I have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Now that I've said all that.
We'll check back with each other. Yeah, because I recognize for that like. So one pattern of my life for the early is just like power through. Don't feel your feelings. Like feelings are just this inconvenience in the way of me accomplishing what I want to do in life. Like that was how I oriented for at least 25 years, first 25 years of my life. Oh. So then I discovered feeling, and then it was like then I went through this period where I was just like a blob. I felt like I couldn't do anything because it was just like everything was just like so intense and and so now I'm trying to find that balance, right, of just like like you have to still function in the world and like get stuff done and like do stuff even when you don't want to sometimes, right? You can't just like want to do everything that you do. Maybe I don't know, but maybe that does exist, and maybe it's still programming that I'm like not listening to how I'm feeling. But it's just sort of more that general way of how I've gone back and forth on that.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying now, and I think that as you get more in tune, as one gets more in tune with their ability to hold feelings, process feelings, and do the function that they are in the process of needing to do, then you get to a place where you're able to titrate the emotion or feeling that you are in that needs to move and still get the job done so that you can be. And also, why can't we just be like, I can't do this activity right now, because what's more important right now is that I feel this feeling and let this move, because this is bigger than the task at hand. Sometimes the task at hand might be more important than the feeling, and sometimes the feeling is more important than the task at hand. So that's something that I think we get more in tune with and in touch with as we experience and learn and hone our body, our experience with our feelings and emotions.
Yeah. Makes sense. It's harder in practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's great to say.
I get it. Check.
I find that most things are like that. Oh yeah, you really said that well. That makes a lot of sense. To actually perform it, it's probably going to take me a few years.
That's the integration and the embodiment. Yeah. What does embodiment bring up for you?
Embodiment?
Yeah. Do you have any associations with that word, or do you have any practices for, let's say you have a thing that you want to be, how do you embody that? Or you get an insight from, a meditation or a time alone, and then you want to embody it or integrate it,
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, when you put it that way, it brings up a lot. It brings up a lot in me. It brings up I've had most of my healing journey has been trying to get into my body and feel safe there. So that when I think of that route, I've come a long way, and I'm actually in a really great place right now, and I'm feeling very happy about where I am. When it comes to a thought or an idea, and I want to embody it, and I want to put it into motion and action, there is I never put these two together, but the same fear that is of me being in my body does come up with the fear. There's a fear of, am I going to, is this just an idea that's, am I going to be able to embody it, or is it just going to get lost and fly off into the ether?
Mm-hmm.
And some ideas really come and land in hard, and you're like, oh, I want to do it so bad, and I get stuck, and I feel like I run into an old wound of not being good enough to do it, not being able. So when you talk of embodying like ideas and stuff like that, there's fear in there. There's still fear in there. Sometimes the idea doesn't leave room for the fear and just happens. And you're like, quite honestly, this podcast, it was like, I got the idea, and a month later, after I had an idea, then I traveled for like 2 weeks and wasn't able to think about it. And then I came back, and suddenly it was like, do the podcast. And I didn't have time to think. It was just happening.
That's my favorite, is because it feels like the embodiment is like happening of itself. Like there isn't a lot of effort involved. Maybe it just means for that thing you're not hitting a lot of your resistance, or your mind is out of the way enough that the path from I'm going to do this to doing it feels pretty easy. Those are my favorite kinds, you know? And there's another part of my mind now that wants to strategize and be like, why did it happen that way, and how can I make everyone happen that way?
Right.
Versus, I'm sure there's value to be gained in being like, well, when you're trying to embody this one, it's hitting this thing and this thing and this thing, and that's why it's difficult.
Yeah, I'm hearing the voice of my therapist again, who I often cite on this show. The follow the ease, follow the flow. Did we talk about this last time?
No, but I'm doing a similar thing right now where the person I'm listening to has this phrase that he keeps saying, which is easy is right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there's nothing to learn from the blocks that are coming up with the other things. Like, keep going with the flow and do that. And then when you hit a block and you hit something that with another idea, be with the block, but don't try to force your way through the block to make the idea happen.
Yeah, so that's bringing up. So I have gotten a reflection from multiple people who know, let's say, us and maybe some of our mutual friends, and I think this is indicative of even maybe something that's in the larger, let's say, like healing community. People who are into this kind of work, is that it attracts a lot of people who are almost like obsessed with the hard path. And that like what healing really means is like getting into like the darkest thing and the deepest thing and suffering your way, and then you come out on the other side and it's like, whoa, that was really intense, right? And like and one of our friends has even said too, like his default way of operating is like that, like if something is a lot of effort and really difficult, then that must be like the most valuable path, and that choosing the easy thing is actually paradoxically not easy. For certain types of people. Other people probably need more discipline and hard work in their life, and that's like a different temperament, you know? But I wonder, do you have any thoughts about that? Like in either among our mutual friends or in the healing community at large, do you think that there are people who are oriented around like suffering is like a virtue?
Yeah, I was like that.
Yeah, I can see that in me too. It was a big part of me that was like that.
Definitely like that. But then I also see, what did you just say about the easy path?
Is paradoxically not, is like difficult to choose because we have a programming that plays out difficult. Choose the difficult one.
Oh, yes, I see that. And also, the easy path isn't necessarily always easy. The easy path might start off easy, and then you're flowing with it, and it's aligned, and then something comes up with the easy path that it does hit a point in you or a wound in you that makes it suddenly difficult to move forward on the easy path. I do feel like, though, in that situation, the momentum of the ease helps you move through and be with the thing a lot easier than if it was right off the bat you run into a wall and then you're like just hitting your head over and over again.
Yeah. So this person who told me easy is right also said that it's not like everything will be effortless and you'll never face challenge, but it's more like learning what type of challenge is easier to move through versus the kind that feel like you're just banging your head against the wall and you're not getting anywhere. And that's maybe speaks to that level of discernment about when do we push through versus when do we stop.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's hard to articulate, but it has something to do with does this effort that I'm exerting feel like it is moving through with a level of ease that is manageable, you know?
I've experienced both of these things, trying to force myself through something, and it just, and I just felt like I was getting beat up over and over and over again to the point where it's like, what's the point? What am I even doing anymore?
Yeah.
I stalled just now because I'm realizing that it might be a good time to do.
I was thinking the same thing, actually. I had one other question that I was curious about, which is compared to when you did your check-in in the beginning, where are you on the spectrum of what you talked about, how that constant surfing of like, I was anxious, anticipating, fearful, ungrounded. Where are you at now?
I dropped into the conversation, and that felt good, so I felt more grounded. And then it's interesting that when you asked that question, some anxiety came up in my chest.
and I was asking it not to take you out of the experience, but more like if I'm about to do a session on you, I'm kind of just curious about where you're at in that in general, and or do you have any intentions or things that you would be curious about for the
I'd love to set an intention. Thank you. Let's see. My intention is that I would love to move this sadness. I'd like to understand what this sadness is and move it. And also, I would love some deep rest, and two more intentions. A very a distant intention is my right eye has been in pain, and I would like a little bit of work on it, but I don't want to put too much attention on my eye. And I would love to experience I would love to build a better relationship with the constriction that I'm feeling right now.
That's great. I like all of that.
Sweet.
Let's see what happens.
Okay. Then we will be right back after my Reiki session from John. And we are back from my Reiki session that I received from John. Usually I say, do you want to share what came up to you? But I'm going to say that to me. Do I want to share what came up? Yes. Yes, I do. Thank you for asking. Well, I got the rest intention met. That was nice.
I heard that.
There's a couple little snores that came out. Some of them were snores from falling asleep. I think there was a couple other ones that were just like something popping in there. So that felt really good. Much needed. And there was a couple things. One that I already said to you was it was interesting. It was lovely to receive a session on my table in my room. I've actually never had that happen before, and experiencing it with the music that I play while I give a session. So I was enjoying the process of, oh, this is what it's like when I do a session for someone, and that was really nice to experience. I liked I feel like I didn't fully drop in until you got to maybe it was like right towards the end of the third eye chakra, but definitely when you got to the throat is when things really like landed in my body, and that was a nice feeling. It was like this warmth and relaxation just went shoosh over me, and I was like thump, and the rest of the time I was just locked in. And what was coming up for me in that moment was I had a little bit of movement of the sadness, and I think what was coming up in that was my attachment, how I grip onto things, how I like, this is the way it's supposed to be. And in this case, the lesson that I'm learning today is given to me in the shape of the podcast, where I thought I was going to be doing a podcast with somebody else, and I was frustrated that it wasn't going to be able to happen because it's the second time that we've had to cancel due to weather. And then thinking, and then you were coming anyway, and I had the thought that, well, I could do it with John, but then I even before I was like fully sold on doing the podcast with you, I was thinking, but he already was a guest, and I can't have a repeat guest so soon, and like I'm setting all these rules for myself, and then realizing that the force behind healing in general, and the force behind this podcast is saying the rules are not as solid as you think they are, and they can be broken, and you can have a repeat guest sooner, as many times as you want. Who cares? The podcast doesn't care. Maybe an audience member, a person that listens might care, but the podcast doesn't care. And we can change the format a little bit, where it's not necessarily a turn the tables episode, but you are going to give me healing, an energy healing session, but we'll have a more of a dynamic conversation with the two of us. And I don't necessarily have to be the one that holds the container every time. And it can be more of a free format, just as long as it's about healing. And it felt really good to like experience, and kind of that sadness was letting go of, was releasing that hold that I had on it. Like, but it has to be a certain way. And when am I letting the audience down? Am I letting myself down? Am I letting the podcast down if it changes? And no, I'm not. Because healing isn't a solidified thing. Healing is, like we were saying before, you're on a journey and you're moving through something that's different every time. And that's what the podcast is. I'm on a journey. The podcast is on a journey, and it's going to shift and change as time goes on. So that's, I guess, the message I've received from not only doing this podcast with you today, but on the table when you were giving me this beautiful, by the way, energy healing. Thank you so much. It really was. I dropped in so deeply and felt so relaxed, and I could feel. Actually, two interesting things were when you did my hands, my palms, and then my feet. It's almost like I learned some crystal healing a couple of years ago, and one of the first things that it was taught to me was taking a mine's blanking. It's a clear crystal.
Quartz?
A quartz, thank you. And putting the point out, and when in your palm, and when you do that, you just feel this flow of energy really nicely and beautifully. And then if you turn around and put the point towards your wrist, the the point is where the energy is flowing from the crystal. It actually is going against the current of your natural energy, and you feel the resistance and the tension in it, and it's really intense. It's actually kind of painful, uncomfortable. And when you were doing that on my wrists, I was feeling that kind of, or my hands and my feet, I was feeling that kind of thing happening. It was really interesting to me because it was like you were putting into me, and like I think that the energy is so used to going out of my hands that there was kind of a resistance to it. It wasn't a bad thing, and I think that it was great that, and I loved that you did that. But that's what I noticed, and it happened with my feet too, which is also strange that happened down there. But I was feeling a tightness in my calves, in my below, between my ankle and my calves when you were doing that as well. Which, I mean, I liked it. I like a little discomfort.
I've done about that before.
That is what's coming up for me at the moment. I'm curious what came up for you, if anything, and also a question before that. Do you use breath work while you're doing Reiki? Some sort of breath work? Because it sounded like you were blowing air and moving things that way.
Yes. What I can say is it's not a conscious decision, but I find, it's actually really interesting about the thing that I noticed. This happens to me sometimes when I do Reiki, but I think this might have been the most pronounced. I was the most aware of this dynamic, which is that when I work with when I go through each of the chakras or each of the different parts of the body for the person I'm working on, what I'll find is that I will be in touch with that area of my body in myself. So if I'm on your throat, I'm actually feeling the energy move in my throat. And a lot of times my body will actually start to move and reorganize in a certain way. And I don't fully understand what it is that's going on there, but there's some kind of connection between I'm working on this part and something is happening in me. And I was very aware of that as I worked my way down your spine through that. And oftentimes when my body starts to move in certain ways, there'll just be this breathing type of thing that will happen. I'll either just take a deep breath or I'll go into a different breath pattern. And I've done breath work exercises and stuff over the years, but I'm not sitting here consciously saying like I am breathing a certain way into a certain chakra, but it sort of just starts to happen. And I just found it easy to just drop into that, and I was very aware of that thing as I was kind of like tracking it in me and in you. So that was that was probably the main takeaway that I had from my side of things, was just being really aware of that happening. The other things, because when you had your share just now, like it brought up so many things. I want to cover that. But like the what I picked up from traditional Chinese medicine is in that system, the palms and the feet are actually the beginning / ending points of the 12 meridians. There's actually 6 in your hands and then 6 in your feet. So that like exchange, like the in and the out, is actually, according to that system, exactly what happens in those places. So it's interesting if you're like feeling that or aware of that, or even the other dimension, which we didn't do now, but of like putting a crystal there to facilitate that like transition point. So I thought that was really cool. The stuff that you were aware of, and I noticed the rest. I felt that for sure, and I actually even felt like my body. That was when I first became aware of kind of that resonance of what was going on in your body was going on in my body. Is that when I got to your throat, that's when like I like changed position, because I was kind of like above you, and my head just kind of went down, and my body felt really restful starting there, and then the rest of the way like different things happened, but I definitely felt that point cool. as well. Yeah.
I love it. I love energy work.
Me too.
I love the attunement of being able to, I mean, it was a practice of co-regulation that was happening while you were providing me energy healing. And I love that is just possible in our bodies. So much.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder, I mean, because there's so many angles that like you could look at healing through, but one of them is just the idea of somebody who is the space holder having a regulated nervous system and then just being with another person. And then all the other things are like ways of making it more specific or focusing it on something, but ultimately like there's some type of like that's like the core of it in a certain way. And whether that's literally just you sitting and listening to somebody while they're crying or, you know, emoting in some way and you're just stable. Like you're, you know, the stability that you provide against that. And then over time, there's like entrainment, like nervous system entrainment is a real thing. Like, I mean, it's most obvious with babies. Like babies don't yet have the capacity under a certain age to regulate their own nervous system. So they're completely dependent on the mother or caregiver to actually do that. And ultimately, like, there's always a baby inside of all of us, no matter how old we are. Like, our, you know, the different parts of our nervous system, there's the mammalian nervous system and the reptilian nervous system. Like, we are adult, we're child, we're baby, we're mammal, we're reptile, we're all of those things simultaneously through a certain lens. And so those parts of our nervous system will always respond in that certain way, even if it's just our adult part calming our child part. But there is something beautiful about having that come from somebody else, because we are social creatures after all. So,
side note on there being a baby inside all of us. When I was a teenager, I had a dream where I got pregnant and had a baby, and the baby, my stomach grew, and then I could see the shape of the baby through my stomach, and then instead of usual birth that a female might have through the canal, the baby just seeped out of my stomach through the skin right into my arms. That's why it was a side note. Because it had nothing to do with what we're talking about.
I know people who've had journeys of them giving birth, man or woman, you know, but most people who I've spoken to have interpreted that to themselves, at least, as like the giving birth to yourself or a new version of yourself. You know, some people have had like dreams of like, I'm gonna have a baby, and it's like almost like a foretelling, but a lot of times it's like within yourself. Yeah,
I had an experience on ayahuasca once where I went through the life cycle, I'd say like 6 times, where I was under the blanket and everything was like kind of reddish, and I got really, really hot, and I started getting cramped, and I was all curled up, and then it was like, it got to the point where I just couldn't be there anymore, because it's like I just ran out of space and ran out of air, and it was just too hot, and then I would pull my head out into the air and go and take this deep breath, and then be out in the space and feel like I was alive again and able to breathe and move, and then I had that experience for a bit, and then it got really cold, and I started to like shrivel up in the cold, and then realized that it was too cold, and then it was like a process of death going back underneath the blanket, and I did that cycle like that like 6 times, realizing partly through that I was going through a life cycle, and I was just kept being dying and born. It was really cool.
What that makes me think of is I've had experiences where you are the facilitator in the room, and one of the things you like is incense. And so you would come around the room with incense at a certain point, and I would be like, you know, in my like, and then I would just catch like a whiff of you walking by, and I would just be like, then you pass, and I would just be like, like right back into the thing.
That's amazing. That's cool.
So those brief respites are really nice from the intensity, you know.
Oh, that's funny. I often wonder what people's experience of the scent is when it goes by and they're in their experience.
Yeah.
I like that. Like, what does that remind me of? It reminds me of, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of The Matrix, the Matrix Revolutions, where I don't know, spoiler alert, at the end they fly above the clouds, right above before machines hit. It's like it's like battle, war, darkness, and then
yeah,
beautiful, and then right back down to the darkness, battle.
And to think that that's like the first time that they've ever actually seen the sun, like the symbolism of that being like, yeah, I like that scene. There was another thought I had around the co-regulation thing that we were talking about, which is I think sometimes that phenomenon also happens with people who like are very holy people or gurus that people go like travel to see, and they just sit in their presence and like meditate or pray or whatever, and people will have these like spontaneous like healing experiences. They'll start laughing, they'll start crying, they'll have memories of all sorts of things, and like like nothing, they're just sitting there. I think that it's like at a certain level, like there are certain, you know, maybe few special people who like emit such a field of like presence that it just envelops the people around them. And you know, I've had friends of mine tell me that they've had like experiences that were deep and, you know, mind-blowing as a plant medicine ceremony, but basically just sitting in the presence of somebody.
Wow.
And it's like they're drawing you into their field of consciousness, which is like vibrating so high that everybody else just kind of gets like sucked up to that temporarily, you know, or, you know.
That sounds amazing. I've had experiences alone in my bed where I feel like I'm on a plant medicine journey.
Yeah.
Going through, like, feelings are coming up, or an intense experience is happening, like an anxiety attack, and then trying to be with. Actually, I'm going to talk about this. Over a year and a half ago, I had these anxiety attacks right before I quit my last job, which was on a TV show, and I was just about to start my A Little Room for Healing energy healing practice, and I had these severe anxiety attacks, like I thought I was going to die, kind of anxiety attacks, majorly in the chest. Like my heart felt like I would be sleeping and it would feel like my heart stopped beating, and I would freak out. It was happening for like a week, and then finally, with the help of a friend, I was pointed to letting, instead of trying to fight the discomfort or the physical discomfort that's happening, try to let it do what it's trying to do and be with it as much as possible. So I spent a whole night doing my best, lying in bed when the anxiety attack would come, when the panic attack would come, and the feeling that my heart was going to stop. I would, instead of fight it, I would try to relax into it as much as possible. And it was hard, and it was terrifying to do that. And I would talk to it, and I would welcome it and let it move through and be with it and love it. And I started loving it. I started saying how much I loved it and cared for it and was allowing it to express. And then I had this really big cry, and it stopped. And over the next day and a half, I think I had like just tiny little tremors of it again, like little like leftover things, but then no more. The panic attacks were gone, and I never had one again, at least up to this point. It was a cool night. Scary and hard and long.
Yeah. I think that's like what I was thinking to myself when you were saying about how like you had this friend that suggested don't fight it, feel it. You know, it's like just keeps coming back to the basics. Yeah. It's like, and sometimes like we're getting caught up in all this intensity, and then it just takes somebody else to be like, you know, I think the solution is to just feel what you're feeling. And we're like, duh. Like,
Well, yeah, it was like she said it, and you're like, oh yeah, I get it, but I can't. And then she goes, well, let's practice it, because I was having a panic attack when she said it, and then she walked me through the process of feeling it, and actually having her walk me through the process of letting it happen was how I was able to do it for myself then. And
now we're back to co-regulation.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't just feel it and it'll be fine, which can help for people who are well enough along their journey of being able to feel really big, scary emotions by just someone saying, you know, if you like, just remember to just feel it and let it happen. They're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I wasn't ready for that kind of intensity at that moment to do that. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Co-regulation. It's so amazing. when we talk about healing and we talk about all these traumas, all these emotions that come through, all these experiences, and I find that it really does come back to this really basic foundation of what needs to be done. And it is letting it happen, like feel it, experience it, let it move through, because it's just energy that wants to move. It's co-regulate with someone, or find a way to regulate your body in a way that allows the energy to keep moving. Always comes back to that. And like we have to find all these ways to like sift and move through all the blocks and all the tricksters and all the boundaries that our wound has put up, and we have to wade through all that just to be like, feel it. Just feel it.
Yeah, it's like letting people say like, well, you just have to let go, but it's like what that actually means. I find like another analogy that's coming to me is it's like learning how to move a muscle that you don't know how to control. Like wiggle your ears, or like raise one eyebrow. Like those kind of things where like people don't have conscious control over a certain muscle, and it's like you could sit there all day going, I'm gonna move it, like, but that usually doesn't work that way, but actually just like feeling what that's like to like what does it actually mean to let go? Like what does that feel like in my mind? What do my thought space feel like when I'm doing that? And then it's like, oh, in my body, what is actually the feeling of letting go, like somatically in my body feel like? And then like there's your energy body, and you feel that letting go. Like so there's all these, it's like learning all the layers of your being, and then learning how to, you can't really do letting go. You can't like move it, but it's like learning how to be in a space that allows that to happen through all of the layers. That's, it's like, it's multifaceted.
And I sit here and I say, healing is just feeling your feelings, but it's so hard to just feel your feelings.
It is.
Especially with the way that we have, that society has set us up. That feelings are bad.
Yeah.
Like when we're taught that, and then we're scared out of feeling our feelings, the process of learning how to feel our feelings is a strenuous, difficult, scary process.
To find your way back to it being easy.
Exactly. And even when it gets easy, it's like there are some still that are like, okay, I know how to feel my feelings, but this one right here is hard. Anger's hard for me. Yeah. Feeling that one is hard for me.
Yeah. And a lot of it is because I would agree with you with everything you said about, especially about the society and cultural conditioning out of feeling your feelings. But it's almost like there are, even among the feelings that are less likely for people to embrace, there's a hierarchy of like which ones are like kind of allowed and really not allowed. And I find that anger is like that's one of the most shamed of the emotion. Like somehow, like being scared or crying is like not, if culturally, if you're a woman, it's more okay to cry, but it's kind of okay to cry. And then it's like feeling scared, but then like anger is like, because people associate anger with harming people, so there's all of those, like, and then we see these movies of violence, and so we don't really actually even have like examples of what healthy anger expression looks like. So everybody just has this negative association with that. So to me, it's one of the most culturally shamed emotions. Yeah.
Agreed. And then when you said, even the crying, that for women it's okay, like it's like deemed okay for them to cry, but even emotions have been weaponized against women.
Oh yeah.
Like it's okay for women to cry and be emotional, but that's why we can't trust them. That's why they can't be in power.
Yeah. Because it's still seen as weakness.
Yeah.
It's like it's like an acceptable weakness, but that's already a bias. Like that somehow showing your emotions is weak. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, you know what? If we just started teaching from the get-go, and of course shifted it in the society at large, but if we started teaching from the get-go that emotions are just energy that needs to be moved, that wants to be moved, God, it would be such a better place. It'd be so much easier for so many people.
It would. That would be a really good start. that the layer deeper from that for me though is that the way to transmit to another being that it's okay to feel your feelings isn't sitting them in a classroom and being like, these are your feelings, it's okay to feel them.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually, it has to be modeled. Like, so it really comes down to kids need to be raised by people who are emotionally intelligent and who are capable of allowing their feelings, because then they'll have the model of what it's like to be around adult humans who can feel their feelings, and then they'll have adults who can actually hold the space for the child that it needs to feel its feelings and know how to relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it,
100% agree.
Yeah.
100% agree. I don't even know what that. I don't even think that me saying teach us was saying that it needs to be done in the classroom.
That's probably my bias. I hear the word teach and I'm thinking like, oh, we just need a course on emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
I
don't even. I'm not even one that fully agrees with school. So
that's okay. That's another.
But that's also has a lot to do with my bias and my experience growing up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not ending it, but I'm feeling even more grounded. Remember when you checked in right before we did the energy healing about how I was feeling? I'm feeling more grounded now, and I'm feeling more open, and I'm feeling less. I'm feeling the expansiveness again. Not fully, but it's opened from the constriction that I was in before.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, like, because I think you might have hinted at this before about the idea of like the thing that's under the contraction. Like, is there a way to be in contraction without feeling like shitty? Or is that come with it? Like, I'm kind of like wondering out loud. Is it like, because everybody, like, there's a part of us that's like, well, let me just be expansive all the time. So actually, I'm curious with you right now, and then maybe like more broadly, is it a genuine actual like I'm feeling expanded, or is it like I'm okay with how I am feeling now, and then
right. Great question. I think I was partly touched on that before, where I was like, there's the expansiveness is actually still underneath the contraction, and so in that sense, when I saw that last night, I was more okay with the contraction.
Gotcha.
Which made the contraction feel better.
Yeah.
So I think it also goes back to what, I don't know, maybe, I think you might have said this earlier, the story we put onto the contraction and the story we put onto the expansion. Like, we're saying one actually is inherently bad and one is inherently good. And really they're both just ways of being.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking about in light of like you can feel fear and excitement, but it's the same emotion.
Exactly.
But then this is another like a little variation on that, which is you're witnessing both the expansion and the contraction, and the you that's underneath that is actually like a truer sense of self and being identified with the passing waves of whether you happen to be expanding or contracting at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So in that in the experience of contraction or expansion, if you can allow it the way that your higher self or the essence of you underneath it all would be able to allow it, then I don't think it wouldn't feel bad.
Yeah.
It would just be okay. Things are tighter now. Huh. Cool.
Yeah. And that's back to like attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Are you attached to one way or the other?
Yeah. Like, things aren't going my way right now.
Yeah.
No, they're just constricted.
Yeah.
Why are they constricted? I don't know. Let me tune in and find out.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting how like the attachment can be, everybody I guess can empathize with the attachment to the expansion. Like, oh, we all want to feel good. Like, this is great. Like, but the attachment to the contraction is also real. As in, and I remember, I don't know if you want to share about any of this now, but like the phase of your, like what came before this is dissecting this like deep attachment that you've had to certain trauma stories.
Yeah.
And in a certain way, that's like an example of being attached to the contracted state.
100%.
Yeah.
Totally. Victimhood.
Yeah.
Victimhood. Totally.
Yeah.
Which is a contracted state. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not something that feels alive for me right now to talk about, especially because literally just put out a whole episode on it.
Yeah. Right. As I'm saying that, I'm realizing, like, actually, they probably already know about this, because that was what we talked about last time.
Yeah. And by the time, when this airs, there's going to be an episode about, there was an episode already out about me in an expansive state. And processing that and grounding in that.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like the weather.
Yeah.
Is it cloudy today or is it sunny today? Why do some people like rain and some people like sun? Some people are attached to contraction, some people are attached to expansion.
Oof. What do you think?
I mean, a lot of it is, I think, inherited from our parents. Like, if they have certain... So inherited in the sense that, like... I'll use an example. Like, let's say one of our parents was really, like, not good with their anger. Let's say they yelled at us, right? And we, reacted kind of like we couldn't figure out how to deal with that in the moment. Option A is that child becomes an angry person, and then all that anger that was projected onto them, they just dump onto somebody else via a, like, repeat the trauma type of thing. But then the flip side is that same person can look at that anger and be like, I am never doing that to anybody. And then they never get angry, right? Nobody never gets angry, but they just never express it, right? So then it all gets internalized, and they repress it all. But, like, both of those things are still a reaction to the programming that was passed on of the parent who was unable to hold their own anger. And whether it goes one way or the other, like, I don't know about that part, but at least I know that the problem with not being able to deal with the anger is a result of that. Like, that's one way I feel like that those get passed on.
Do you feel like it's the same with actual weather too? Like, a parent hated the rain, and so a kid hates the rain, or a parent hated the rain and the kid didn't like that the parent hated the rain, so they were just like, I love the rain and I'm gonna love the rain no matter what.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Anytime there's some type of, like, strong emotion around a thing, a child can look at that and either go subconsciously, usually at the time, being like, copy it, or rebel against it, But yet, so Carl Jung, I first came across this, like, somebody who articulated this really well in Carl Jung, and the term he used for this is the push and pull of the shadow. And he said a good way that something is, like, a triggering thing in your shadow is if you're, like, super fascinated and attracted to something, or, like, super repulsed by something. Anytime you have a strong reaction one way or the other, it's a push or pull of the shadow. So if you look at people out in the world and you're like, I really hate the way that this person does this. If you look at that strong repulsion probably means that whatever that attribute is that you don't like is actually in you somehow, and you're not, like, owning it, or you're not aware of it, or it's, like, operating in ways that are not healthy in your life. Or if you look at somebody and be like, oh my God, I really wish I was like them. It's the same type of thing. Like, you really admire this thing, so that's also a part of you that you haven't quite fully owned yet. You haven't fully owned the greatness, and you haven't fully owned the negative, quote unquote negative side.
Interesting. I actually don't remember ever hearing the flip side. I've heard the shadow part of being upset, that annoyed but bothered by something in someone, and knowing that that's part is in me.
Yeah.
Fascinating about the admiring something in someone and not fully owning that that's part of you too.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Right. Because a lot of people are actually more afraid of, like, their light in a way, and, like, stepping into their power and what that would mean.
Guilty.
Yeah, so then that would be an interesting line of inquiry, is just look at all the things that, like, I want to be like that person, or, like, I really wish that, like, I could do this or that, Those things are the other parts that they're there. But
yeah.
So Robert Johnson is like another Jungian author. So he called it the golden shadow. That was, like, the term he used for, like, that.
Oh, the golden shadow. I really like that. I really like seeing that. I'm going to be on the lookout for that. Actually, I think that this is another one of my intentions for the year. Basically, the overall intention is just the word expansion. And I can see that coming into my life, of noticing that and being more aware of what I'm admiring and quote unquote jealous of other people. Maybe not a quote unquote, just jealous of other people, is in me too, and that I'm not taking ownership, or haven't taken ownership of it yet. That sounds like a lesson in expansion or a practice of expansion is to find those things and start to take ownership of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting.
January's
been a good month.
So, yeah.
I've been like getting a lot of movement and info about my intentions already right off the bat.
Yeah. It's always fun when they happen quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, not met, but just like clues
Things
and
start to
hints
happen.
and steps. Yeah. I like intentions better than resolutions, for me personally, because the intentions is something that I think gets presented to me and becomes part of the process of my growth throughout the year. And a resolution is something that that is like, I'm going to do this and I have to do this. Like you put up an attachment to doing something. This is what I resolved to do.
Yeah. And generally we're like willpowered out. Mm-hmm. Like in our society, like because we're presented with a model of like you are an isolated individual that has to make things happen, right? And like that's cool, but that's not the whole story. Like our culture, I think, is super attached to that story of like the lone, whether it's an entrepreneur, I'm going to build a business, or I'm going to like, carve out this thing, or I'm going to make this thing happen in my life, making it happen, right? And then the allowing is like new vocabulary to a lot of people. And so if you're able to have goals, however you want to call them, but do them in a way that feels that has more of the allowing energy than the like going out and make it happen energy, that's can be nourishing, Do
you have any goals for this year?
How many goals for this year? It's really interesting. My New Year's Eve, I was sick with COVID. And that's a whole other story, but it was just a very interesting. It was something about the way that the year changed for me. Like I wasn't in any space at that point to be like, these are my goals, and I'm going to set this whole thing. So it sort of like didn't happen, but I kind of like that in a way, because probably even more than a lot of people, I for so long was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and like. The universe has been slowly like taking all of that away from me, and I'm living more moment to moment, and noticing that my life is getting better in a lot of ways. Like on the surface, through the lens that I would used to judge whether I was happy or successful, not maybe as much, but now I'm like almost changing my definition of what that is at the same time, and finding that I'm just generally more happy and more content. So if I had to give you an intention now, it would be to do more of that. Like whatever I just said is like keep going that way. But ironically, one of the things that involves is not necessarily setting as many specific types of intentions, because what gets brought my way ends up feeling better than what I could have thought of. And that's one of those things where like I still see the value in setting intention. I probably will go back to that at some point when I'm in like a different phase in life. But I've always heard people say that one of the limiting factors of setting goals is that you're always only setting goals within what your current, how much you can conceive. Like I can only conceive of certain things inside the box you're currently in. And so there's inherently a limitation to that. Whereas the surrendered or the allowing kind of attitude allows things to come into your field that you never would have even thought to ask for.
So it sounds like your intention is to continue to allow what's coming to come. Does that sound restrictive to call it an intention?
No. Yeah. Allow what comes to come.
To be open.
And then to feel into how I'm receiving. Maybe receiving, if I had to point more, it's more because like stuff is always happening to everybody. It's just most people are fighting it or resisting it or trying to change it or like doing some type of manipulative mind process to what's happening to them.
Stuff is always happening to everybody. So, yes.
Right? So it's like that part is like, that's going to happen. I don't have to wish things to happen to me. It's more like, how am I being with the stuff that's happening? And like, how am I receiving it, and how am I working with myself when I encounter resistance to receiving the things that are coming? Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. This has been great. this surprise episode with you, and I like where it took us, and I like the back and forth of it, and I loved the energy healing of it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for being open to doing this out of the blue.
It's funny, that was a microcosm of what I just said.
Yeah.
I actually didn't plan that, but it's like the same way the podcast was like what you like worked with here. It's like this podcast is like a manifestation of what I just said.
Yeah.
I just showed up here today and you're like, want to do a podcast? I'm like, yeah.
Amazing.
Keep them coming.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really liked the jam we just had, the back and forth. So cool, so fun, and I look forward to more. I know that you really like podcasts.
Happy to come back anytime.
So thank you, and to all of you out there, I invite you to make a little room for healing in your lives, and invite you to see how open and receiving you can be to the things that are coming your way. And we'll see you next time.